Ooh, you can really smell the cloves and the cinnamon. Those warm spices with the chilies. I can't wait. I just got back from Mexico and I didn't have any birria where I was there, so now I have a little bit of a craving for it, but I wanted to do a really fun, simple version and share it with you, show you how you can turn an empty jar into delicious birria tacos. It's gonna start with some dried chilies. You'll want a variety of chilies. Here I have some California chilies, some Mexican chilies. You can go with Anaheim, pasilla, ancho chilies. I love ancho chilies. Dried chilies are really easy to work with. I usually just grab a bowl, snip the stem side off, and empty as many of those seeds as I can. You can kind of rip them up a little bit, but that's it. Now, this birria recipe takes all the classic flavors of birria, but we're gonna use some dried spices, some shelf-stable spices. So we have a quick, easy go-to spice blend that we can make our birrias from. Traditional birrias involve chilies just like this, a lot of steps, a lot of labor, toasting spices and blending and charring your vegetables. But this one takes a few shortcuts so you can have that same flavor much quicker, much easier. I always call these recipes, these shortcut recipes that are inspired by a labor intensive or a lot of love. These are like the weeknight version. I challenge you to make authentic birria from scratch ingredients, but during the weekday, you kind of want to shortcut the same flavors, the same presentation, but done quick and simple. So that's what this is. Still made with love, still delicious, but we're using our kitchen know-how to make things a little easier. Shake out those seeds. Now you want to get rid of the seeds, of course. In many chilies, the seeds are a source of heat, but they can also be very bitter. So that's why you traditionally get rid of the seeds when you are using these whole seed pods. If a few are in there, that's totally fine. For this recipe, you'll need, if they're large chilies, about anywhere from 10 to 12. I would choose a variety of chilies, so somewhere from 2 to 3. So you can choose a main chili, maybe use 5 or 6 of those if they're large. If they're smaller chilies, you may want 1 or 2 more, but I would definitely do a variety of chilies. I like the different flavor profiles, the different heat profiles. You'll get a more robust, deeper flavor. Some chilies are very fruity, other chilies are spicy, some are sweeter, believe it or not. Even though they're spicier chilies, they have some sweetness to them, so you'll get a robust flavor by using a variety of chilies. Dried chilies are really inexpensive and easy to work with, so don't be afraid to pick up a bag of dried chilies at the grocery store, because you can do exactly what I'm doing. De-seed them, de-stem them, blend them up, and you have a great go-to chili powder. I have a little food processor here. If you have a spice grinder, great. Even if you have a normal blender, you can usually blend up some chilies in a blender. Just need something with a blade. Let's get those in there. Now, even though these aren't really spicy chilies, you'll not want to touch your face. You want to wash your hands really well. If you're really concerned, you can always wear a pair of kitchen gloves. Traditionally, these would be soaked, but we want to keep our version dry and shelf stable so we can make up our kit and then have it ready a few days down the line for a great dinner. Blending! All right, watch the nostrils. You don't want to get a big whiff of this. Oh, we got a big chunk. I might go a little bit longer. Doesn't need to be a fine powder. Just want to get it small enough so then when we use it in our recipe, it'll break down and turn into the sauce. I've been putting this thing to work. It's starting to smoke a little bit. Might be time for a new one because I use it basically every week and then I abuse it. Dropped it a few times, so I think the motor has had enough. All right, we're almost there. I'm gonna give it a little bit longer. I see some bigger chunks in there. I just wanna break everything up into a uniform size so there's no large chili chunks. Large chili chunks? All right, that should be perfect. Great. Let's be very gentle. You don't wanna disturb the powder too much or be too close and inhale it. There we go. I'm usually the captain of like sneezing when I'm using spices, so I'm gonna resist sneezing right now. Actually, forget sneezing, I wanna smell this. Those chilies, there's something about dried chilies. They have such a great aroma. Many chilies are really like deep and raisiny. You'll smell some caramely notes, just so good. People usually associate chilies just with heat, but chilies are such a dynamic flavor. That's where the bulk of the flavor of this recipe is gonna come from, is from the chilies. So let's continue on building our birria in a jar kit. I'm just gonna add some common spices that you probably already have in your pantry. In birria, the ingredients are fairly simple. It's the process and the technique that can be kind of labor intensive. And anytime a project is labor intensive in the kitchen, I say that's where the love comes from. You know, when you're spending the time in the kitchen stewing and stirring and blending and using a bunch of techniques, that's a lot of flavor. So I'm gonna add in some cumin, one of my favorite spices. Let's go with some oregano. If you can find Mexican oregano, even better. One thing I like to do with oregano or any dried herb, just crush it up a little bit. Sometimes they're very large and flaky, so we want it a little bit more powdery, so go ahead and give it a little crush in your hand. That was my oregano in there, onion powder. So I'm using a lot of powdered ingredients because I want this recipe to be easy. I just dump the jar in and go. Everything's shelf stable. You can make several of these at one time, so you always have a couple in your pantry ready to go. Onion powder in. Wait, that was onion powder. This is garlic powder. That's what I get for not reading. For something fun and funky, a little interesting, let's add a little ground cloves. Now usually whole cloves are in the traditional recipe. I'm gonna use about a 1/4 teaspoon of dried cloves. I love those like earthy, very deep, rich flavors. And then, oh, speaking of earthy and rich, a little cinnamon. Usually a cinnamon stick is in traditional birria, but we're just gonna do some cinnamon. I'm gonna do 1/2 teaspoon, maybe a little bit more, just a little under 1 teaspoon. I find that cinnamon for me can be a little overwhelming in these savory recipes, so I go a little shy on it. Or what you could do is just throw a cinnamon stick in there if you want to. Black pepper. Now you're gonna have to watch me stand here for a while because we need quite a bit. And this grinder goes so slow. Here we go. Put on the podcast and just grind your pepper. You can use pre-ground pepper, that's fine. I'm not gonna judge you. Here's my PSA for the day. Don't let anybody shame you in the kitchen. You can take shortcuts. You can take the easy route. Not every meal has to be this gourmet adventure. It's all about flavor and it's all about using what you have. So I have this really slow pepper grinder, so I'm just gonna go to town. Okay, that's probably more than enough. Not a necessary step, because this is just gonna be dumped when I cook the birria later on. But I wanna shake it up, blend all those spices together. They're really not gonna do anything in there anyways, but at least it looks prettier all mixed up, right? Here's some options for you. Traditional birria uses some tomatoes. I'm gonna use a tomato powder, or you can use just some tomato paste when you prepare the birria. So those are your options there. You can add some tomato powder right into your jar. That takes care of that tomato flavor as a substitution, but I kind of recommend just setting aside some tomato paste to add in when you make the birria. So we're gonna leave that out of this spice mixture, but feel free, add some tomato flavor in there. When it comes time to make the birria, you'll need some broth or liquid. I'm gonna use some beef broth. The other option you could do, just put some beef bouillon powder or beef bouillon cube in here. That way you can dump this in, make your birria, just add water. It makes it super easy. It's also great to do that if you're gifting it to somebody for them to make birria at home. All they need to do is get some beef, add this powdered mix right into their crock pot or pressure cooker, or even they could just slow cook it in the oven or on the stove. Got a lot of options for cooking it, but anyways, it's a good shortcut. Just add some beef powder, just tell them, add this, add beef, cover it with water. You've got dinner in about an hour if you're using a pressure cooker. Now the traditional recipe is gonna need some acid. It helps the beef cook and also provides a lot of flavor. You can do a glug of apple cider vinegar. Sometimes it involves some limes. We're gonna take a shortcut with citric acid. It'll add a little bit of tang, a little bit of sourness, balance out all the flavors in there. I'm just gonna add about a 1/2 teaspoon just for a little acid background note that'll help cook the beef and marry everything together. So you don't need much. And if you're not familiar with citric acid, you probably have tasted it before. It's in a lot of dried recipes. If you've had any like sour chips, it's using citric acid. A lot of pre-made spice mixes have a citric acid in them. It's a preserver. You can use this stuff to clean. That's why I have a big bag of it. And if you haven't seen it before or don't know where to get it, check the canning supplies, you know, where the mason jars are and all that. Usually there's citric acid there. Sometimes it's in the baking stuff. So you may have to look around the grocery store a little bit for it, or of course, where else? Good old Amazon can get it to you. Ordered this bag, thought it was like this big. This bag came. Isn't that always what happens when you order online? I'm like, oh, I just got a small little package, and then this huge behemoth shows up. All right, one more little mixy mix. Get that citric acid mixed in. Now, one thing you may have noticed is there's no salt in here. That's a little bit on purpose. If you're using a tomato bouillon powder, that has salt in it. If you're using a bouillon cube for the beef substitution, that has salt in it too. Now, when I use the beef broth, when I make the birria, that's gonna be salt in the beef broth, and I'm gonna salt my meat. So usually I omit the salt, or just be aware of what ingredients in your jar has salt in it, so you can control those salt levels. So this is salt-free, because I'm gonna salt when we cook. Why does bay leaf have this sprinkle top on there? Is like for freshness, or like it's needed to like for the jar to seal I don't know. I've always wondered that, because I'm like, who's shaking bay leaf? Nobody. I don't need this. It's just wasted plastic. I'm gonna put in 2 bay leaves. Now bay leaf, anything you're slow cooking, anything that's braised, roasted, you know, that kind of stuff, long cooking, needs bay leaf. Bay leaf is delicious. We're gonna put 2 in there, tuck them in the jar, good to go. Ta-da! It is that easy, just taking some dried spices, some pantry staple ingredients. We've got our birria kit ready to go. This will make about a 3-pound chuck roast worth of birria. This is all the flavor you need. You'll just dump this in with your meat, add some liquid to cover, add your beef broth, add your water. If there's beef bouillon already in here, and you're off to the races. Dinner in no time. And since we're spending the work making this anyways, make a couple of these at one time. You can gift one to a friend, a family member, have a couple in your pantry for yourself. You have a beef birria in a jar kit ready to go. I guess it would help if you label this too, so try to label it if you can. I always preach you should label things, and I never do. Am I exposing myself? Usually I'm like, yep, that's my birria blend. Once again, like, label your stuff. Oh, you can really smell the cloves and the cinnamon. Those warm spices with the chilies, fruity chilies, warm spices from the cloves. It's gonna get me. I feel a sneeze coming on. Ooh. I can't wait. I was supposed to keep you on a shelf so I could make you later on in the week, but I think I'm gonna make birria now. So these are a lot of flavors, but through the cooking process, they'll all marry together and blend and create that delicious birria flavor. It's just omitting all the technique and all the process and procedure. So like usually you're charring your tomatoes, peeling them, blending them. You're usually making the sauce. There's a lot of steps that go involved. So any shortcut recipe I do, I like to make the authentic version first, go through the steps, go through the labor, then find a way to shortcut it. Use the same flavors, use the same ingredients, but just in a simpler form. How can I transform that Sunday dinner, that labor-intensive, that love-intensive recipe, and turn it into a weekday recipe?